I'm Lindsay Smith with Real Agriculture and Real Ag Radio, and joining me now is Tyler McCann. He's the Managing Director of the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. Welcome here, Tyler.
Great to be with you, Lindsay.
All right. Well, it's not the issues panel, although you do join us, of course, on the radio show often. This time, we're going to talk specifically about a report that CAPI's just put out. This is, though, phase two. So before we get into this new report, let's back up a step, Tyler, if you would. Set up for us this sort of reporting structure and what was phase one before we talk about phase two.
To step even before that, what's been driving the report and some of the work that we've been doing at CAPI lately is a recognition that we need to better understand the risks that are in front of the sector. And this work started before a change in U.S. administration, but was driven by this recognition that there is this great untapped potential in Canadian agriculture. We do a lot of things well, but we could probably do a lot of things better. And much of what stands in the way are the risks that are keeping people up at night, the risks that are holding back either investments or change in the sector. But we don't really have a good understanding of what those are. And the other reality is often in the sector, we think in value chains or we think in our regions, and we don't do a good enough job thinking across agriculture and agri-food. And so we wanted to go out and basically ask the sector, what's keeping you up at night? So phase one was a survey where we went out and we asked farmers, but we also asked kind of other industry stakeholders. We asked government, civil society, and other actors, what are the risks that you're worried about? We put those results out last year, this work that we did with the Angus Reid Institute. But then phase two has been, okay, so how do we dig a little bit deeper to understand what do those results really mean? And so we held a series of dialogues in 2024 in the fall. We went back and looked at some other work that we've done and others have done, and we've tried to connect those dots now into this report, which has just come out.
So it's called the Agri-Food Risk Report. We will have a link, of course, on realagriculture.com, but you can, of course, find it on CAPI's website as well. So we are going to go over sort of some of the findings and some of the outcomes, but do really encourage everybody to go and take a look. There's lots there that we won't all get to in this interview, of course. But let's dig in a little. One of the things that I sort of noticed is, as you said, you sort of captured what industry, what farmers, et cetera, are worried about, but also that there was this incredible optimism for the sector. And perhaps I am being influenced by what's happened in the last month. However, so I feel a little bit like maybe some of this optimism is misplaced. How do you broach that from what you took in for this report?
Yeah, and the title of the report is From Optimism to Realism, and it's to try and get at that point. And again, this is something that we took away last fall based on the results and the feedback that we'd got, and again, I think goes beyond just the current challenging environment that we're in. But we do have this issue where we asked questions around what are the risks that you're worried about, and then how confident are you in the government or the private sector's ability to mitigate those risks. And what we found is that people are concerned about risks. These are things that are top of mind. But we also heard that in general, people are optimistic about the future. And so it's been a bit of a challenge, and this informed a lot of the dialogues that we've had around this, is how do you reconcile the fact that we are very optimistic, but we're also very concerned about risks, and we're not very confident that we can manage those risks. And I don't know if that is just the spirit of agriculture and of farmers and understanding that you need to go out and you need to put your crop on the ground, even though you could face drought or flood and something that could wreck it, but you need to do that work anyways. I don't know if that is what we're seeing in these results, but I think it also is unfortunately a bit of a barrier to action at times, because we can be too optimistic about the future, and we may not take seriously the risks that we're facing and our need to act on them.
And I appreciate and we'll talk a bit about sort of the action items from this, of exactly that. I think that, you and I were at the Future of Food event just last week, happening here in Ottawa, which I think had a good balance of, yes, there's lots of things to be optimistic about, but exactly that, unless we're actively pursuing those opportunities, they're not just going to fall in our lap. We have to actually be trying to solve some of the challenges ahead of us.
That's right. And I think that there's always this dynamic. Canada's Ag Day is all about celebrating Canadian agriculture. But I always get a bit frustrated by the language around we need to tell our story better. Because yes, we need to tell our story better, but we also need to do things differently. And we also need to act, and we also need to change the things that we know that are there. And one of the things that came out in a lot of this work is that people aren't surprised about the risks facing the sector. We heard that, we presented the findings, we asked different people participating in the discussions, do these resonate with you, or are you surprised by anything? And by and large, people aren't surprised. By and large, we know that these are the challenges that we face, but yet we struggle to do anything about it. And so I think that there was this imperative before to say we need to do a better job acting. Clearly, there's an imperative now because the risks are worse. And we've seen this already in some survey work that we've done with Real Agri studies where farmers are telling us in January 2025, 65% of farmers think that this year is going to be more risky than last. We know that this is going to get out and this is going to be a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Now, several times on the issues panel, one thing we really appreciate, Tyler, that you bring in is this perspective of the agri-food, the food processor space. Because I think often, yes, sometimes we don't think nationally, sometimes we think too regionally, sometimes honestly within the sectors we think, we get siloed into our own little. So from the food processor, the agri-food portion of this, what are some of those challenges that were identified through these reports?
One of the things that was kind of interesting to look at is, by and large, policy and regulatory issues are a challenge for everyone, and that kind of shines through in a lot of what we see. Obviously they worry less about farm income and debt, but they still have some concerns around input affordability and other issues. And I think overall they've got this kind of broader concern around what I would consider more of the competitiveness type issues, right, labor challenges like that. But I think that one of the things that we heard is that a lot of the solutions do get to be the same at the end of the day. Again, they may be kind of a different spin on them, a different take on them, but getting government that works better is something that's in everyone's interest. Getting a more coherent policy agenda is something that works in everyone's interest. And so that's something that I think that, again, as much as we talk about the differences, there are also a lot of similarities too at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So in looking at that, so this is phase 2 from optimism to realism. There's a third part to this, right? That will move forward this year as well. But in this sort of second part, there are some discussions of those action items of what CAPI sort of sees as a possible path forward on some of these. So what are those action items that really we need to see action on?
Yeah, and so I think that we tried to highlight two things that we think that there's broad agreement on. One, we need a meaningful ag policy framework that realizes the opportunities and drives growth and sustainability for the sector. That's something that we heard broadly. And the second one, that we need a more cohesive approach to risk management that looks at risk management beyond risk management programs on the farm, but looks at risk management across the sector. And we tried to take that and the findings from the survey and what we heard through the consultations that we did and turn it into 4 key takeaways. One, we need governments to do less, but do that work better. We need the sector to focus on collaborating, not competing. We need to find ways to work better together. We need clear roles for government and for the sector. That risk management, I think, only really works if we've got a very good understanding of where everybody stands on it. But we also need clear, measurable, realistic goals. We need to have that sense as to where are we going? How ambitious are we being? And we need to use that to really set the stage for kind of the actions that we're looking for at the end of the day. And I always feel the need, Lindsay, to say the fertilizer target, I think, set this kind of bad cloud over targets. There are good ways to do it. It does include kind of a clear sense of working together to set those targets. It does include a sense as to an action plan of how you're going to achieve them. And it does include this recognition that they need to be realistic and achievable. And so I think we need to move past kind of our aversion to ambition and direction and embrace that, but understanding that we can't let government do it all. The private sector, the industry, farmers, food processors, others have a real important role to play, but all of that can come together to help us deal with this risky future that we're facing.
Part of that, as you mentioned, an ag policy framework. We are coming up on sort of that every 4 years, sort of review and perhaps roll out. But we're also at an interesting juncture with this government, of course, currently prorogued. This Liberal government may fall as, in March when things reconvene. Um, and yet, some of that, of course, behind the scenes work continues, obviously, regardless of what's happening politically. But I mean, timing wise, how important is it then for some of these topics, some of this path forward to be included in these discussions that are going to happen, right now, this summer, into this fall?
Yeah, really important, Lindsay. And we've heard a lot of people say in the context of the threats from the United States that we can't let a good crisis go to waste. But I really am worried that we are. But this is the right opportunity. We've got all of these things happening. We've got this motivation from a disruption in this trading relationship that's core to the success of the sector. We've got this kind of changing landscape around the world. We've got all of these other pressures. And then we have negotiations starting on a new policy framework that really ties up billions of dollars in public investment for the sector. This should be the moment for us to kind of pump the brakes for a minute and say, okay, what do we need to do better to better be able to manage the risks and seize the opportunities that are in front of Canadian agriculture? Because the status quo is not good enough anymore. We should be optimistic for the future, but we need to be realistic about the challenges that we face and the need to do things differently at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Let's not let a crisis go to waste. Quote of the day, everybody. Okay. Tyler, where can people go to find this report and, of course, all others with CAPI? But what is the CAPI website that we can send them to?
Yes, please go to www.capi-icpa.ca to get the report. Also, take the opportunity to sign up for our email list where you can get this and everything else that we do, and follow us on all of those social media channels to stay in touch with all of the great things we've got going on at CAPI. And Lindsay, I should say, this report was made possible by the good support of the Global Institute for Food Security and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and we're very grateful for the support that they offer.
Always important. All right. You heard him. Go check out this report and let us know what you think. As always, get in touch. We love to have your feedback, and we'll work that in perhaps into an upcoming issues panel that Tyler joins us on. All right, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Lindsay. Have a great day.